what it's like to do a 3-point turn with no power steering in a MK1 MX5. Now, as you can see, it's not the most pleasant driving experience. So today we're going to fix that.
That's right, in this video we are finally installing power steering on my MK1 MX5. Now, I know in the last video I mentioned doing the rust repairs that I'm not going to put any more mods into the car. Well, technically this is sort of free because behind me I have a donor car, which is an eunos import. So that has come with power steering. I'm just going to rip it out and throw it into mine, so kind of like a free mod. I'll show you how to get it out. The old rack in mine is pretty simple because there's less components, and then I'll show you how to fit it all up. First step is to remove the track rods from the hubs. I know hitting them out with a hammer can damage them, but I have got new ones going on, so that didn't bother me, and it's the easiest way to get them out. I did have to use a breaker bar on the one side, but it made easy work of it. So with the track rod ends off, now time to take the actual rack off. So I'll show you the bolts quickly that to undo. Just in the engine bay from the top, you can just about see that bolt there. Underneath from the front. Just that one there, and obviously there's one on the other side of that top one too, but it's a lot easier to get from the bottom. This one is a bit of a pain, so I'm going to try and get that one off first. But once the rack's actually loose from the subframe, we can then come into the top of the engine bay, start getting all of getting the pump off and the reservoir. I am going to try and keep all of the lines connected as one, trying not to leak any fluid anywhere, and then obviously it's easier to put it in as one unit too, and not trying to figure out and lose your mind where all the lines go and everything like that. So keep it in one is a lot easier. Get those bolts off and then move into the engine bay. This side is the hardest side to reach as the fluid lines are in the way. I did keep the front one screwed in just a little, just to hold the rack on until it's time to come off. So with those bolts on the rack loose, time to move on to the next job that I have been dreading. So we need to disconnect the steering column from the knuckle of the rack. So if you can just see there, I have got my spanner ready. It is just a 12mm bolt going straight through the column to connect it to the knuckle to the rack. So you want to try and get that off, and then once everything in the engine bay over here is disconnected, the rack should come off. So I'm going to tackle this now. Don't know how I'm going to get the leverage on that, but we'll come up with something to try and get some more leverage on that and get it loose. So I'll show you that now, and then we can move on. This actually wasn't as difficult as I thought. It wasn't that tight, but the worst part is just getting your arms past the intake manifold, as there's not a lot of room. Once it was loose, I found a ratchet spanner to be the best tool to get it out. Now we can start loosening all the accessories, starting with the fluid reservoir. Just two 10mm bolts, one on each end. Next up is the pump. I started with the bolt that connects the tensioner to the bracket, and then the long bolt that holds the pump onto the bracket. then came across my first issue, which was the fan stopping me getting the long bolt out. It was easily sorted by simply removing the fan, and as this is a parts car, I didn't mind taking it out anyway. Just two 10mm bolts on the top and the electrical connector. The pump can then be pried from the bracket and moved to the side. And this is where I came across my next problem. I could see no way to get to the last bolt holding the bracket on other than removing the column pipes for the heaters. If there is another way, please drop it down in the comments to help others doing the job. It's just two 10mm bolts and then the silicone pipes on either end. Go ahead and move it, but then I came across my next problem, which I'll explain once it's off. So a bit of an update for you then. As you saw, I finally got the bracket off. What I ended up doing is just knocking this dowel out as far as I could, just to give me enough clearance to get a socket onto that bolt. I tried to get it from underneath, and you can only get literally half an open-ended spanner on. So with just half an open-ended spanner on, you're just going to round it. I didn't even want to try. So knocked the dowel out, got enough room just to get a socket on, and easy as that, it came off. It was quite loose, to be fair. I'll show you quickly now, just dropping all the rack now that everything's loose, and then we can get it back into mine. One thing I will mention that I didn't get a chance to film is removing the steering shaft from the knuckle of the rack. It wasn't too bad of a job, but I will show it when removing the rack from my car. Before the rack comes out, I quickly remove the bracket holding one of the fluid lines onto the subframe. With that removed, I use my stool to help get the rack out and guide the top components down. And there we have it, one power steering setup. So now that the rack's off, I'm just going to give it a big clean, so get all the grease off, get all the oil off from the donor car, but of course you don't have to watch that, so I'll quickly get going with this. And just like that, it's all clean. With that all clean, it's now time to start fitting it to mine. I'm not going to show you how to take mine out. I'll just quickly time lapse it because it's exactly the same as what we've already seen, with even less components actually to take out. So once mine's out, I'll get back to you when we start fitting the new one. Time to take out my steering rack then, and again starting with the track rods. Then the 4 bolts holding the rack to the subframe. This is a lot easier on this one as there's no lines in the way. At this point you want to somehow lock your steering wheel in the straight position. I ended up using some golf clubs and cable ties, which worked great. Now we come to what I mentioned about knocking the steering shaft out of the knuckle. I used a long pry bar and a lump hammer to knock the knuckle off the shaft. Time to now fit the power steering to my car, starting off with the bracket that holds the pump. I then fed the power rack and all the components up into the engine bay and got the rack seated onto the subframe, making sure I keep the bolts loose to give me some wiggle room. Fitted, I then used this neat little trick with some washers to get the dowel back in place. I simply fed the long bolt through and tightened the nut on the end, 2 washers against the dowel. A new power steering belt going on. To get the new belt on, I found it best to place it on the top of the pulley and then just spin it clockwise. Now you can add some tension to the belt by tightening the angle bolt on top until you can just about wiggle the belt a little bit without it being too tight, and then lock the tension with the 2 bolts underneath. Finally, you can fully tighten the long bolt holding the pump to the bracket. Then it's time to bolt the reservoir into place, just the 2 10mm bolts on each end. With all the engine bay components buttoned up, it's time to connect the rack knuckle to the steering shaft. I first rotated the knuckle to line up with the shaft and then added some grease to both to help it slide in better. Got it started by hand just by simply lining up the grooves and getting as much of the shaft in as I could. Once it's partially in, I went ahead and used the same technique with the pry bar as I did to get it out. One thing that did help was prying open the pinch on the knuckle just to help the shaft slide in easier. Good whacks of the pry bar, making sure to hit the knuckle as evenly as possible until you can't see any of the flat bit on the shaft and only the spines above the knuckle. You can go ahead and tighten it up with a 12mm bolt. This doesn't have to be very tight, just as snug as you can get it. Not forgetting the bracket holding the lines to the subframe. Finally, we can tighten everything up, starting with the new track rod ends and new split pins. Then lock those into place and we're good to go. And that is technically finished now, so everything's up all nice and tight. I'm going to give it a quick test, turn on the engine, get the pump going, try the turning just with the wheels off at the minute while it's up in the air. If all is good, we'll go for a test drive and we'll see if it's all okay. Just double checking for any leaks or noises before giving the wheels a turn, lock to lock. And we're all good. Okay, let's go give it another test. It already feels amazing just standing still. So much easier. We'll then give it a drive. Try our 3-point turn again. I mean already, look. Just pulling off the driveway, one hand. So we'll give our 3-point turn a go. Look at that, so much easier. One hand. And again the other way. Oh, this feels brilliant. And just like that. So I'm really happy with that. It's nice to get some parts for free almost, so the install wasn't too bad. Hope you learned something and I hope it helps you fit power steering if you want to. So thanks for watching, see you in the next one.